Dear learners, welcome to the second week of the MOOC, Rural Development in India. Today, we shall discuss the Unit 5 of Module 2. The title of the unit is Evolution of Rural Development in India. Rural India comprises of almost 65% of the population as per the recent estimates. Therefore, majority of the Indians reside in villages. The progress of the nation, thus, is determined by the progress of the rural areas of India. Agricultural growth is not the only factor behind rural development. Education, infrastructure, employment, women empowerment, social justice, and the strengthening of local governance are important as well for the progress of the rural society. The evolution of rural development in India is a long process which commenced in the pre-independence period and has continued till the contemporary period. According to the census of 1901, the population of India residing in the rural areas was approximately 90%. Due to lack of efforts by the British government for the welfare of the rural people, social evils like poverty, illiteracy, food shortage, etc. were the common problems of rural India. Thus, several attempts have been taken for the welfare of the rural population in the pre-independence, post-independence, and the contemporary periods, respectively. The aims of these initiatives were particularly for the improvement of the living conditions of the poor people of the rural areas. The land revenue system, cash crop cultivation, commercialization of agriculture, decline of traditional industries, rural indebtedness, land loss, and displacement were the consequences of the colonial rule in India. The advent of the British had completely disrupted the existing traditional system. Therefore, agrarian distress and economic underdevelopment were some of the problems that had existed in the pre-independence era of the country. These were the problems that had to be tackled by the government after India gained her independence. Now, let us discuss about the initiatives undertaken in the pre-independence period for rural development. The measures that were taken for rural development in the pre-independence period were mostly community, individual, or group extensions. These initiatives mostly emphasized on the traditional methods like subsistence agriculture, traditional irrigation techniques, community-based agriculture, local self-governance, etc. The first experiments of rural development by Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore was one of the earliest philosophers of India who believed that the regeneration of India must begin from its villages and the development should be rooted in culture, cooperation, education, and self-reliance. Tagore was always a critic of politics and it found a minimal place in his social philosophy. Tagore tried to divert the course of agitation politics towards a constructive one where stress was laid on the work of rural upliftment. Tagore deeply thought on the rural problems and accordingly laid two plans which he would depend on for rural construction. The first one laid the basic ideals, principles, and postulates of rural reconstruction, and the second plan was compromised on the schemes of social welfare and community development. The idea of social welfare and community development were the brainchild of Rabindranath Tagore, and based on his ideas, the government of India had initiated the plans for community development in 1952. Tagore had considered that rural reconstruction was one of his major aims in life. During his work as a zamindar in East Bengal, Tagore first came to contact with rural Bengal in 1890s. This was a landmark of Tagore's life because during that period the idea of rural reconstruction crossed Tagore's mind, and he decided to assume the responsibility himself without the help of any political leaders. From the initial phase, Tagore had a holistic vision and was determined to achieve his goal. Tagore aimed at all-round development of a village, so his programs included development of health, education, cottage industries, agriculture, fisheries, weaving, etc., which would result in a self-sufficient and self-confident society. He introduced the experiment of tractor for cultivation, furnace for potteries and ceramics, a husking machine for paddies. This indicates that Tagore, instead of using the traditional methods, promoted at using the modern scientific methods for the progress of the villages. In 1904, Tagore had written an essay known as the Swadeshi Samaj, where he analyzed the causes of the destruction of the Indian village life and made suggestions for the reconstruction of villages. Tagore then prepared a scheme to give practical effect to the ideas of rural reconstruction that he had expressed in the Swadeshi Samaj, which was primarily dependent on the concept of rural reconstruction through collective efforts. The revival of the traditional cottage industries, agricultural development through cooperative efforts, and the elevation of poverty of the village folk was emphasized. An attempt was given to form an intimate relationship and harmony between the villagers and the rural workers by Tagore. In 1908, Tagore had established the youth organization in the Pargana of Kaligram as a part of his rural reconstruction program, where he tried to create a class of functionary workers who could learn to identify themselves with the people. Tagore also emphasized on the establishment of the rural banks as a part of his rural reconstruction program. Therefore, he established the Patisar Bank in 1905, where the poor peasants could borrow money from the collected fund at low interest rates. The moneylenders had to wipe off their business from the area. In 1911, Tagore purchased the Surul Kuthibari, where he could experiment his idea of Sriniketan. Sriniketan was an important part of Tagore's educational reconstruction work. Almost after a decade, in 1922, Tagore, with the help of an American, Leonard K. Elmhurst, had established the Rural Reconstruction Institute at Sriniketan. The Institute of Sriniketan was organized under a democratic Karma Samiti or working committee which aimed to understand the major problems of the villages and introduce some urgent welfare works for the villages. The issues of the villages that were prioritized by Tagore's institute were health, education, agriculture, animal husbandry, cottage industries, and village organization. A group of 8 villages functioned as the center of the program to cover the development of these areas. The Rural Reconstruction Institute manifested itself in research, extension, and education. The objectives of Tagore's Sriniketan were to create an interest in people for rural work, study rural problems, help village develop their resources, and improve village sanitation. These, in turn, intended to create a spirit of self-help, develop village leadership, organize village scouts, establish training centers for handicrafts, and establish a demonstration center at Sriniketan. Tagore felt that in order for the development of the villages, it was necessary to revive the rural industries and had established a Shilpa Bhavan at Shantiniketan. A cottage industries training program was taken under his initiative to encourage the villagers to make artisanal objects so that wealth could flow in the villages. This would help the villages to be self-sufficient. Rural library was also an essential part of Tagore's rural reconstruction program. Rural library services were established through rural extension centers. It not only aimed at increasing the literacy rate, but also developed the rural libraries as information and cultural centers in villages. Rabindranath Tagore's rural reconstruction work was an important aspect for the development of villages. The ideas of Tagore's rural development could be seen in the schemes of the post-independent period, like the community development programs, block development program, cottage industry development, etc. Now, let us discuss briefly about the Gandhian constructive program. Mahatma Gandhi, apart from being a political leader, was a social and economic activist too. Gandhi's social philosophy has been written in the Hind Swaraj of 1909. This work of Gandhi criticizes the Western civilization. He rejects the modern industry completely and pleads for the revival of the organic villages, communities of the pre-colonial past. Gandhi idealized the village community and insisted for the inclusion of the craft production from the elite to mass nationalism. That is why, in 1920, during the non-cooperation movement, Gandhi recommended the spinning wheel economy, which had encouraged hand spinning and hand weaving in every house. Gandhi's approach to rural development was holistic and people-centered. He emphasized on the moral and spiritual values for overall development. Gandhi believed that the development of a country was dependent on the development of its villages, rural economy and rural industries. An ideal village for Gandhi was based on the idea of Gram Swaraj or village self-rule. He imagined the villages be an independent, self-sufficient republic and be dependent on other villages when necessary for national welfare without any kind of exploitation. In the Harijan, Gandhi has written, quote, "My idea of village Swaraj is that it is a complete republic independent of its neighbors for its own vital wants, and yet interdependent for many others in which dependence is a necessity. Thus, every village's first concern will be to grow its own food crops and cotton for its cloth. It should have a reserve for its cattle, recreation, and playground for adults and children. Then, if there is more land available, it will grow useful money crops, thus excluding ganja, tobacco, opium, and the like. The village will maintain a village theatre, school, and public hall. It will have its own waterworks, ensuring clean water supply." Unquote. The ideal village of Gandhi's dream was a comprehensive one which consisted of economic, social, educational, and political dimensions. The Gandhian model of rural development was based on village Swaraj, where the basic principles were trusteeship, Swadeshi, employment, self-sufficiency, decentralization, equality and equal distribution of wealth, Nai Talim, Khadi and village industries, removal of untouchability, etc. Gandhi formulated an 18-point program or the constructive program where he had addressed the congressmen to take up the issues of various groups. This became the framework for the new India he wished to see after independence. Despite rapid urbanization in the contemporary period, the Gandhian model of rural development is still relevant in the contemporary period. Unemployment, inequality, migration, environmental degradation, etc. are some of the problems of contemporary period, and the Gandhian ideas offer solutions to these issues. Village level planning, development of cottage industries, Nai Talim, organic farming, etc. are some of the Gandhian ideas which can be used in the problems of the contemporary issues. We shall discuss about the Gandhian model of rural development in detail in a later unit. Now, let us move on to the other projects that were taken up in pre-independence India for rural development. The Gurgaon project was a significant rural development program which was started in 1920. It was launched by Mr. F.L. Brain, the Deputy Commissioner of Gurgaon district. Mr. Brain took the initiative of launching this project for the upliftment of villages of the Gurgaon district. Under this program, a village guide was assigned for each village who passed on information to the villages. This program aimed at the overall improvement of the villages and introduced improved seed implements, improved methods of cultivation, construction of manure pits, reduction of expenses on the social and religious functions, etc. in the district. The objectives of the Gurgaon scheme were to bring out the villages of their own opinions and convince that improvement of the villages was possible and they should be taught better ways of living and farming. Under this scheme, Training schools were set up for the village guides and women. A health association was set up which was responsible for the function of the health centers. Brain, after his successful experiment at Gurgaon, was appointed the Commissioner of Rural Reconstruction in Punjab. In 1935-36, the government of Punjab had granted rupees 1 crore for rural reconstruction work. This was later transferred to the Cooperative Department. The Martyrdom Project. The Martyrdom Project was set up in 1921 by Young Men's Christian Association YMCA at Travancore in Kerala under the supervision of Dr. Spencer Hatch. This project intended to develop the spirit, mind, and body. It aimed at the fivefold development of physical, spiritual, mental, economic, and social. This was implemented for an overall development of agriculture, public health, and education in the villages. The project laid importance on self-help, cooperation, and improving literacy. The Excelling Club, the Honey Club, were some of the projects which were successful to become cooperative societies. With these extensive activities, the project was successful in meeting the mental, physical, and spiritual needs of the villagers. Some other projects of the pre-independence era which worked for the rural development of the areas were the Indian Village Service, IVS, the Nilokheri Project, etc. The Indian Village Service was established in 1945 by Arthur T. Mosher and B. N. Gupta to assist the villages to develop individual, volunteer leaders and local agencies to establish the villagers to be self-sufficient. This project included unique techniques like personal contacts, informal group discussions, demonstrations, production, and the use of visual aids, tours, and trips, etc. for the rural development. As a result of the efforts of this scheme, residents of 15 villages were benefited. Similarly, the Nilokheri project was an initiative launched in 1943 for the rehabilitation of the refugees, and it became fully operational in 1948 in West Pakistan. The primary goals of the project were to rehabilitate displaced people, attain self-sufficiency, and meet the basic needs of the people. Based on the objectives, the idea of agro-industrial economy was adopted for the development of the nearby rural areas. These were some of the unplanned and unorganized efforts for the development of the rural areas of India in the first half of the 20th century. These were not the initiatives of the government but of individuals, community, or a group who realized the importance of villages of India. Through these initiatives, there developed different rural regions of India according to the needs of those areas. But the idea of self-sufficient village was adopted by these schemes. It demonstrates the significance of villages in India. Now, let us discuss about the developments of the post-independent and contemporary era. After India's independence in 1947, the government had understood that for the development of the newly independent country, whose 2/3 of the population lived in villages, the government had to launch schemes for the development of villages. Poor infrastructure, illiteracy, poverty, low agricultural productivity, etc. were some of the common problems that rural India had faced. In order to overcome these challenges, the government of India had launched various programs and schemes for rural development. Thus, for the first time, the government had taken organized efforts for the rural upliftment for the country. The key initiatives undertaken by the government were the first five-year plan. The first five-year plan from 1951 to 1956 primarily focused on the agricultural development and establishment of the local self-governing bodies to promote economic development with an aim to develop the villages. Agricultural development, land reforms, rural infrastructure, community development, employment generation, education, and health of the rural areas were some of the first 5-year plan for rural reconstruction. The efforts of the first 5-year plan marked the beginning of the organized rural development plans and programs of independent India. It had targeted to uplift the communities of the rural areas and promote development amongst them. The role of the 5-year plans in rural development shall be discussed in detail in the next unit. The Community Development Program. The Community Development Program, CDP, was a major organized effort undertaken by the Government of India to intervene in the process of rural reconstruction and development as a part of the first 5-year plan. The program was launched in 1952 and it aimed at holistic rural development through participation of the people, decentralized planning through the effective panchayat in villages, increasing agricultural production, improvement of the cottage industries, animal husbandry, providing basic health and educational facilities in the villages, improvement of housing and the living conditions of family, etc. The Community Development Program was influenced by other projects like the Constructive Program of Gandhi, the Sriniketan project of Rabindranath Tagore. The program was launched on October 2, 1952 to symbolize Mahatma Gandhi's concept of self-reliance and cooperation among the communities. The CDP, or the Community Development Program, was able to establish a vast administrative structure, the National Extension Service, which consisted of blocks and Gram Sevaks. The Panchayati Raj. The Panchayati Raj system came to existence in 1959 with the aims of democratic decentralization and local participation in planned programs. Andhra Pradesh and Rajasthan were the first to adopt the Panchayati Raj system, and after a decade, this system was established in various states of India. Balwant Rai Mehta Committee had proposed a 3-tier structure of local self-government. Zilla Parishad at district level, Panchayati Samiti at block level, and the village panchayat at village level. But the system of the Panchayati Raj, the structure was not uniform in all the states. The Panchayati Raj had raised expectations to transform the rural society and institutionalizing village-level governance. However, it did not achieve the expected success because of the involvement of the state government in the system. Intensive agricultural programs and green revolution. Since rural development is mainly related to agricultural development, so the government had taken the initiative to launch the Intensive Agricultural District Program for the rapid increase in agricultural production, which was a success. This had led to the introduction of the high-yielding variety seed, HYV, which set the pace for green revolution in the 1960s and the 1970s. The Green Revolution aimed at boosting agricultural productivity by adopting HYVs, modern irrigation techniques, and increased use of modern fertilizers and pesticides. The Green Revolution had increased food productivity and benefited the large-scale farmers, but the marginalized farmers had to suffer due to lack of access to the resources. The period from 1980s to the 1990s was emphasized to create employment among the rural population and rural infrastructure. The Integrated Rural Development Program, IRDP, was introduced by the government to eradicate poverty through self-employed income-generating activities. Different schemes were introduced for the upliftment of the marginalized sections by providing them vocational training and livelihood opportunities. Thus, the program became one of India's largest poverty alleviation programs. The other programs and schemes which aimed for rural employment and poverty eradication were the National Rural Employment Program of 1980, which focused on generating wage employment for unskilled laborers, Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Program of 1983 that guaranteed the employment for landless laborers. These schemes were merged to form the Jawahar Rozgar Yojana in 1989 to alleviate rural poverty. For the development of infrastructure schemes like Indira Awas Yojana of 1985 for housing and Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana in 2000 for constructing rural roads were introduced. Rural health, rural education, and drinking water were also given importance. The economic reforms of 1991 had resulted in the shift of India's interest towards market-oriented policies, and rural development was not focused on during the initial years, for which it faced a challenge. But soon, the government had also included the matter of rural development and several schemes were adopted. In 1999, the Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarozgar Yojana was introduced, which encouraged community-driven development through the establishment of the self-help groups. These self-help groups boosted local participation and empowerment and have played an important role in the reduction of poverty, women empowerment, and community development in the villages. Also, these self-help groups have played a role in promoting sustainable livelihood, women entrepreneurship, and rural mobility among the rural marginalized communities. The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act MGNREGA of 2005 provided guaranteed 100-day wage employment to rural households. It was mainly helpful during the time of unemployment and had boosted the rural households, and it became one of the world's largest social welfare programs. After the year 2010, the government has drifted towards the needs of the 21st century for rural reconstruction, sustainable livelihood, digitalization, clean energy, social justice, and climate issues are given importance. Schemes like Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Gramin, launched in 2016, aims to provide financial assistance to construct concrete houses to the rural population living under poor housing conditions. The Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, launched in 2014, is focused on improving hygiene and sanitation in rural areas, aiming to achieve universal sanitation. Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana was launched in 2011 and it aims to alleviate rural poverty. The scheme promotes self-employment and sustainable livelihoods for rural households. Empowerment of women and marginalized communities is also covered by the scheme. E-National Agricultural Market eNAM, launched in 2016, is an digital trading platform that connects the agricultural markets of the country, which has enabled the farmers to sell their production online. This will ensure that the farmers get the fair price while reducing the role of the intermediaries. PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, launched in 2019, aims to provide direct income support to small and marginalized farmers so they could purchase their agricultural inputs timely. Despite the continuous efforts of the government for rural development since independence, there are several challenges that rural India still faces. Poverty, inequality, agricultural distress, poor infrastructure, migration, and environmental problems are the major challenges in the 21st century for rural development. Rural development in India has undergone different phases and has evolved from pre-independence period till the 21st century. The self-sufficient villages of the pre-colonial period were destroyed after the advent of the British. During that period, Tagore and Gandhi tried to recover the self-sufficient villages of the ancient period by implementing their ideas, yet there was a long way to go. After independence, the government has undertaken various schemes and policies relating with the issues of the period for rural development. From the constructive program of Gandhi, 5-year plans, community development program, and digital empowerment initiatives, the journey of rural development in India has evolved. Progress has been made in agriculture, infrastructure, health, education, social welfare, etc. But there are some new challenges like climate change, inequality, poverty, and environmental sustainability, which need to be addressed for the further progress of the rural society in India. With this, we have come to an end of today's discussion. I hope that you have understood the process of the evolution of rural development in India. In the next unit, we shall discuss about planning and rural development in India. Thank you for watching.